Hello, everyone. This is Jeremy Dennis, lead artist of Moz House. Thanks so much for listening to the Moz House podcast. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by our May resident artist, Jake Kimble. Jake is a multidisciplinary Chipewyan artist and curator from Treaty 8 territory in the Northwest Territories, a member of the Dënesųłıné First Nation, now based on the stolen territories of the Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh nations. With a background in acting and a BFA in photography, Jake's work is infused with theatricality, levity, and deep emotional intelligence. His practice centers on self-care, gender refusal, and Indigenous joy, while using humor and ambiguity to explore the absurdities of everyday life. From large-scale public installations to prestigious group exhibits, Jake's work is transforming how we see Indigenous identity, resilience, and resistance. Thank you so much, Jake, for joining the Moz House podcast today.
Masi to Jeremy for having me and for being here.
Oh, absolutely. This is essentially your very last day of your 2-week residency. Earlier today, I also want to acknowledge Leon at Longhouse Reserve and Mago Martinez, who both facilitated the Insider-Outsider program. This is the first of 2025. And you gave a great overview of your work. You did a slideshow that'll be up on YouTube very soon. But I wanted to go into a little bit more depth in the podcast, maybe hopefully Indigenous photographer to photographer, get more in depth into some of the themes. But I wonder, for some of our listeners' sake, can you just start with a journey into art? How did you get into photography and visual art in particular?
Yeah. My name is Jake Kimble. I am from the Dënesųłıné First Nation in the Northwest Territories, as Jeremy briefly said. And yeah, this is my last day at Moz House, which is incredibly exciting, but bittersweet as well. It was a beautiful talk. Masi Cho to Esperanza and Mago for facilitating that and making that happen. And yeah, how did I get into the art world? You could have gone back 5 years ago and I would never have pictured myself, being a full-time artist, but also a curatorial director and also doing a residency in the Hamptons. That's something that would have been at the very last of my list of where I think I would be, but I'm so incredibly grateful to be here. My journey into the fine art world, or quote-unquote fine art world, has been a really interesting one. I grew up all over Western Canada, graduated high school in Alberta, and then I did a year of theater at the University of Calgary, and then after that I moved out real west to Vancouver, and I did the 1-year acting program at an acting school that I won't shout out because I have a lot of problems with that school. But after that, to be honest, my student loans were coming into repayment and I wasn't ready to be an adult yet. And so I say this is a half joke, but yeah, I applied to art school because I didn't want to pay my student loans back. But I say it's a half joke because I really have been making photographs and art my entire life. And yeah, did a 4-year bachelor degree program and got my bachelor's in photography. Soon after that, COVID happened, the world shut down, went crazy for a minute. In 2021, late 2021, I got a job as a gallery assistant at this gallery called Ceremonial Art in Vancouver, which I have been working at for the past 4 years and am now the curatorial director of. And so our gallery really focuses on the emerging and development of new Indigenous contemporary artists. We're a sister gallery to Macaulay and Company Fine Art, which is a separate gallery, like I said, a sister gallery that represents more established Indigenous talent, especially in Canada. And yeah, it's been a weird journey to get here. It's been fun.
Thank you for that. Oh, this is going to be a technical thing.
Oh, am I too far?
Oh, yeah, you might be too far.
Okay.
We only do the best quality interviews at Moz House. So.
Hey.
One option is you could just hold it if you feel like it. You might want to have some slack. He's a very tall person. But yeah, I think within 6 inches, we'll just keep it like that.
Like around this area?
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. And it's not too loud for you or anything?
No. I think we're good.
Perfect. I did want to talk about some of your works, maybe some selections, some of what we saw at Longhouse earlier today. One of which is Pick It Up Quick, your prints on paper towel rolls, cutting out individual sheets, putting them through, as you said, a $40 printer that you found.
Yep.
Somehow the quality of the prints are so amazing. I've never seen anyone else think to do such a thing. but they're such beautiful works about home, seemingly everyday scenes in your daily life. Sometimes it's things that remind you of traditional imagery. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how did you get into this unique medium? How did you even think about your paper towels as a soaking element?
Yeah, it's really interesting, these new works. I actually first kind of came up with the idea when I was doing a residency in Banff in Alberta this past August. I was doing a Leighton Artist Studio residency. And I've had this idea kicking around for quite a few years now. But I was thinking about alternative substrates, especially being an artist from the Northwest Territories. Like I tell people all the time, I was born on a dirt road, and we used to have a set of streetlights in our town, but they got removed last year. And so it's a very small town and very northern Canada. And the nearest art gallery is 5 hours away. And that's only in the last couple of years that kind of opened up in Yellowknife, which is the capital. But yeah, growing up, I had no access to quote unquote fine art galleries or just art galleries in general. And there's no fine art printers, there's no fine art framers. And so I've been very reflexive in the past couple of years just about my upbringing and how did I become an artist? How does one want to be in a world that they weren't really born into? So again, I started recontextualizing for myself just to understand where were my art galleries? How did I engage with art as a kid? And for me, a big one that I would consider was the magazine racks at the grocery store, like at the checkout line. And there would be like the National Enquirer and Bat Boy and just all of these kind of my setsuna, my grandma in Chipewyan, we call them gossip rags. But for me, they were always these really mostly beautiful images, but just the images with the graphic design and the bold advertising print and that aesthetic was always like captivating to me because being from the north, it's just a completely different world. And another one that I frequently talk about is the aesthetics of early fast food chains. We had a Kentucky Fried Chicken in our town growing up. It's not there anymore, which makes me so sad. And this was before digital menus took over, which I despise. Those were my very first light boxes. And I think light boxes are just so beautiful and so cool. And especially when used in these kind of quote unquote cheap and gaudy ways that people don't necessarily think of as being art or quote unquote fine art. But to me, those were very formative. And so thinking about decontextualizing what fine art is, trying to think about how I can engage in an honest way of being someone from these specific set of circumstances, I was thinking about alternative ways of showing and printing photography. So yeah, I bought a $40 printer from the drugstore and a roll of Bounty paper towel, and I kind of MacGyvered this little sleeve, and it was a lot of experimentation, a lot of patience. But yeah, I was able to print quite a few actually prints directly onto paper towel. Yeah, the quality and the detail of because all of these images are of my traditional territory in the north, and just the detail of the trees, the lettering, the grass, you wouldn't think of. It's honestly shocking that it's worked out this beautifully. That was the impetus and the starting ideas of wanting to print on paper towel, but working with this material for as long as I have now, for about half a year, I'm also thinking about the purpose of paper towel and what it's designed for. It's meant to absorb, it's meant to soak up. And so I've been really interested in combining technologies of photography and memory and paper towel. And so if I could just quite literally soak up the land, soak up these memories. And plus, I think it's just really cheeky. And it's very funny because it's also a subversion of what fine art photography is. It doesn't have to be this giant, like $10,000 fine art print that's framed in 99% UV glass. It can be a piece of paper towel.
I thank you for that. And yeah, I think as many people did at Longhouse, I also had so many questions about your work and things beyond the bounds of what you showed earlier today. But I wonder, when I think about photography, I'm always thinking about like editions and how you can reproduce an image almost infinitely. So you're pushing it beyond that by using everyday materials, things that are probably costing a few cents to produce and have. I'm really curious about your philosophy behind you being a successful artist and being in so many collections, and this material that one day might turn yellow, it might degrade, it might just absorb the moisture in the air. What is your thought process like in a year from now if you sell or have these pieces in collections?
Yeah, it's a very real conversation that does need to be had, especially working as I do sell my work commercially, and I've been having quite a few conversations with a bunch of different people about this. I've been chatting with my gallerist because I do understand the practicality of, because these are not archival materials. That being said, because the work really does have so much to do with memory, and because they are so personal, I've been having a lot of conversations because I also wouldn't mind the degradation. And if they do yellow, if they do become brittle, if they do start to deteriorate, because they have so much to do with memory, that is what I'm speaking about in these works. Now, that's my kind of... Oh, and I've also chatted with a couple elders, like for one, Faye Heavyshield, who's an amazing artist and an Indigenous artist in Canada. And I was just explaining to her, or just chatting with her about this very topic. And she said, no, keep it as it is. Write it into your contract that you're the only one who would be able to recreate them. And if one does start to fade, then you can produce another one. And so there was a really interesting conversation to have. And because she works with different materials that degrade over time, she has written it into her acquisition contract. She made sure to have conversations with the institution and say that this is how it's going to be. And for me, that is also so inspiring because I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. I don't always have to placate or I don't have to bow to what an institution wants or what a collector wants. And so I'm having a bunch of ongoing conversations. And so that's my artist hat. But it is really interesting because I also do run a gallery and I do understand the practicalities of living under capitalism. And at the end of the day, someone's got to put bread on the table. I am having a couple other conversations just about kind of reproduction and alternative methods to keeping the essence still there. I know one conversation with my gallerist is producing them on a couple layers of photography and then printing those on rag paper or like a really thick archival paper. I haven't figured it out just yet. The conversations are happening.
Oh, thank you for that thorough answer. And if you haven't already seen Jake's work, you can find it on jakekimble.ca, and the project is Pick It Up Quick.
And that's also just a play on words of Bounty's slogan, like being the quicker picker-upper, and just pick it up quick, pick up your language, pick up your land, pick up your memory, and yeah.
I love that. This is such a great project that deals with humor because of the material. But in your presentation, you also spoke about your self-portrait with your grandmother. I do wonder, these are just beautiful images where you are taking turns throwing pies in each other's faces, and that's another inherently funny composition. Earlier, you mentioned that your grandmother has such a great sense of humor and you get it from her, but is there pop culture content that you consume, or are there other photographers that you find inspiration from? Just because I know it's always so hard to look at an image and laugh outside of memes, for example.
Yep. A really big inspiration for me through school and now outside of school and as a curatorial director is Shelley Nero, a Mohawk photographer who you are in a show with, an upcoming show with. So shout out Jeremy, which is incredibly exciting. And I'm not at all jealous. Shelley's earlier work, especially, I think it's called Aunties and Beehives. And a lot of Shelley's photography has always been such an inspiration to me because, and she too works like primarily in self-portraiture as well. And now I'm thinking about her shirt series, which I think, did I download? Yeah, I did. And just for those who might not be familiar, it's a series of 9 photographs, which are light boxes, actually. And it shows a figure wearing, I believe it's her sister. Is it Shelley or is it her sister?
Maybe her sister.
I think it is her sister. It's a photograph of 9 photos, and the first and the last one are just landscapes. And then the first one is, I believe, Shelley's relative, but also do not quote me on that. The third image says, "My ancestors were annihilated, exterminated, murdered, and massacred." The fourth one, "They were lied to, cheated, tricked, and deceived." The fifth, "Attempts were made to assimilate, colonize, enslave, and displace them." The sixth, "And alls I get is this shirt." And then in the 7th image, it's the figure without the shirt. And then in the 8th image, it is a visibly what appears to be a white woman, and she is wearing "and all I got was this shirt." And then the 9th image goes back to the landscape. And so, yeah, Shelley's work has just been so inspirational for me. And I actually had the chance to meet Shelley. They just had a retrospective, which was at the Vancouver Art Gallery. And so she gave a talk, and she just so sweet and just so powerful. And it was just really such a pleasure to meet her. And what I love and appreciate so much about Shelley's work is that she is able to talk about these very serious and heavy subjects with a little smirk. There's always an element of, you feel Shelley winking at you, and which I think is just, I believe humor to be such a successful tool in starting conversations that a lot of people don't want to have. And so I think, yeah, I believe humor to be almost like a secret, like, side door to these conversations of displacement, assimilation, colonization, racism. Shelley, I would say, is a big one. I also really appreciate the work of Kent Monkman, who is a Cree painter. They just had a big show opening in Denver, I believe. Their work is just so unbelievable. And I'm very fortunate to call Kent a friend. I actually just saw them in Toronto. Kent's work is really great, especially their paintings of their alter ego, Mischief Eagle Testicles, which is just such a great name. I really enjoy the work of Adrienne Stimson, a performance artist. Who else do I really enjoy and who makes me chuckle? Barbara Kruger, actually, too. I remember coming across her work in art school, and I really had an affinity to her work. I think it's so funny that I remember coming across an article where, because Barbara Kruger is very much known for the red Futura style. Futura is the font. It's these, but she also utilizes this advertising aesthetic because of her history of working at Condé Nast. And so she really developed this notable, recognizable aesthetic. And then Supreme comes along and just lifts it. And then it was so funny. This was years ago, but there was another brand that kind of copied the similar aesthetic, and then Supreme threatened to sue the new brand over like copyright infringement. And then someone had asked Barbara what she had thought about it, and she made this, I think she typed up this document in Pages or just some kind of basic Microsoft Word type thing, and she was basically like, "You guys are all jokers," which was really cool. But Barbara too also really understands humor, the power of wit, the power of being acerbic, cheeky way. So I think, who else is? There's quite a lot of other artists, comedians too.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. All the artists that you mentioned, the visual artists, I definitely saw the connections, but Barbara Kruger was a surprising one to add to the list. I'm looking at your bodies of work. There's not too much text in there, but I know your series Grow Up has some overlay. And then you're also a writer. I'm not sure if your writing gets into the artist statements or if it's more personal and journal, more of a journal part of what you do. But can you talk about that connection between your work and Barbara's text?
Yeah, it's funny because I haven't incorporated much text into my newer work. Probably it's been maybe about 2 years since I've incorporated text directly into my work. A series that you had mentioned that really was a catalyst for my career taking off was the series called Grow Up. In Vancouver, there's a gallery called the Polygon Gallery. Every 2 years, they hold an award titled the Philip B. Lind Emerging Artist Prize, which goes to an emerging artist. I've been nominated twice for it, which is incredibly exciting. I made the shortlist a few years ago in 2022, 23, because it is happening in like December or January. For that, I developed a new body of work, which is titled Grow Up. It's a combination of archival photos of me as a child paired with studio portraits. There's 9 of them in the series. I've subsequently made more that belong to the series, but I showed 9 at the Philip B. Lind Emerging Artist Prize. And so, yeah, a combination of archival photos of myself and studio portraits. The one that really got the most attention, I would say, was Grow Up #1, which is a photograph of me when I think I might be about 6 or 7, wearing a cowboy hat. I'm actually going to the Calgary Stampede in Alberta. And so, yeah, dressed like a little cowboy. And over top of it, I've layered this text, which reads, "I was told peace was mine to keep." And with many other of the images, there is all these kind of little idioms, these little witty sayings that come from my notes app. My notes app looks like a crazy person's journal. I went back through all my notes and collected all of these little things and thoughts that I was thinking about, and I created these 9 images and with these texts. And so some of the phrases are, "You get all the happiness you deserve." Another one, "Just because you look down on me doesn't mean that I look up to you." "Make peace with your demons, or your demons are going to make peace with you." And peace is spelt in both P-E-A-C-E and P-I-C-E. "Don't spill your guts, I just wash the floor." And then "Take yourself too seriously," and "two" is spelled with 1 O. So a lot of these sayings, really, there's an ambiguity to them. And like, for instance, "I was told peace was mine to keep." And so it's layered over a photograph of me as a child. And so I was thinking about the idea of a peacekeeper. And the reason why the series is called Grow Up, because I was really investigating my relationship with my inner child. I was doing a lot of therapy. I was doing a lot of unlearning behaviors that were no longer serving me. And also some examination of my childhood and what wasn't right, and readdressing my relationship with my parents and doing therapy. And yeah, the photo, "I was told peace was mine to keep," is growing up, big family, and it wasn't all roses. And I very much, from a very young age, had to be an adult. And so I used to say that I was the peacekeeper of the family, and I knew how to not only not rock the boat, but keep the boat steady in my family. And in this photograph, I'm very much assuming this kind of authoritative position. And then with the text, "I was told peace was mine to keep." But that's also like a lot to put on a child. And yeah, and then the one next to it, "You get all the happiness you deserve." That one, I love the ambiguity in that one specifically too, because upon first reading, or first digestion, if you will, "Oh my God, of course, you get all the happiness you deserve." But also, some people don't deserve a lot of happiness, and there are some monsters out there. And so this entire series, incorporating the text, was really just this examination of how I've become who I am, how I've grown up, and all the kind of like funny, cheeky little life lessons I've learned.
And thank you for that. I also wanted to change directions, not too unrelated, but going back to the talk that you gave earlier that included some of this work, I did want to make sure I covered this question of a quote that you said, which was, "I consider photography a ceremony." And why that stuck out to me so much was because we, at least here at Shinnecock, we tend to focus on traditional art styles like beadwork or dance, regalia making. and to consider like digital photography or photography in any form ceremony, I wanted to ask, how did you come to that point? How did you define it? Just because I'm always trying to get other tribal members interested in photography, and that might be like an open door type of situation.
Yeah, positioning photography specifically for me as ceremony is like, I can see how a lot of people will be like, what? It's not necessarily historical, and some people might disagree with me, but it is ceremony for me. The reason I call it ceremony is because I primarily work in self-portraiture, and I do the setup, I do the lighting, I do the editing, I do the photography, I get the prints. I don't do the printing, but I order them. But so much of it is really, like 99% of it is literally just me. And for me, it has been such a powerful tool to understand not only who I am, what I'm going through, and also what are my best angles. And it has been so powerful to really get to know who I am, what I'm feeling, how that feeling looks, how it sits and where it sits in my body, how it comes across. Authenticity and really having your heels on the ground and knowing who you are is such a powerful thing because you're grounded, and then you can meet other people where they are. I think we should all really not be afraid of ourselves and really spend time with ourselves. It looks different for everyone, and whether that's you going into the bush to spend some time for yourself, whether that's disappearing and doing like a bunch of beadwork, or going on long walks, or just journaling, or talking out loud to yourself. I think that there's so much power in really understanding who you are, because if you know where you come from, then you know where you're going. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. Some of the new work that you're doing here at Ma's House, I don't want to spoil it too much, but you're working with trickster stories. You shared in the presentation a self-portrait of you at perhaps one of the Southampton beaches. It's a large vertical, and you, I believe, have a fox's tail coming out of your mouth. I wonder, it's such a beautiful image, but my question is, when you're creating these very different depictions of things that are traditional or things that might have come from previous generations, and we tend to think of them as static, or that's just how they're always supposed to be, do you have any reaction from your Indigenous community back home towards your work? Because maybe I'll preface and say the work that I do as a photographer, it's pulling those things in our history and our narratives, presenting them in new ways. And I don't know if they look crazy or people disagree with them or feel uncomfortable by them. But I wonder if you ever think about just the ways that people may agree with the representation, may disagree. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's a very real thing. And especially working in a commercial, I'll just speak about that real quick. Working in a commercial art gallery that specifically works with Indigenous artists who work in all different forms of mediums. Like, I'll quickly speak about this artist and then I'll get back to the fox photograph. But we represent an artist, Michelle Sound, who's Cree and Métis from Swan River First Nation in Alberta, and she has made cyanotypes on elk hide drums. Here, I'll show you one, because they're so unbelievably stunning. And she also does these archival photographs, which are huge. They're all like 40 by 52 inches. She goes in and tears them and goes in with beadwork, with caribou hair tufting, with quill work, which are amazing. These are the cyanotypes that she does on these elk hide drums. And there have been people who say, you're desecrating a drum, it's supposed to be sacred. And those conversations are valid in the sense that they have the right to them. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're correct. And I think getting into, like, of course we have sacred ceremonies, and there are these historical traditions that have kept our people alive, kept our cultures alive. Of course, you have honor and treat with reverence. But that being said, when we get into, especially as like between Indigenous people when we really get into policing what is and what isn't something that makes you Indigenous, or whether or not you're defiling your culture or stuff like that. I think that can be really insidious because it is a byproduct of colonialism. It is a byproduct of division, and there's a reason why all of these different nations express themselves in different ways. And would you compare nations and have that same conversation of, oh no, as Shinnecock people, it would be weird. I would think if you were like, oh no, the Cree or the Dene or the Chipewyan, you're not doing it the same way we are, therefore you are not Indigenous. And so I think, yeah, in terms of have I had conversations with people from my community? Yes, I will say a lot of the Chipewyan people, we have a very interesting sense of humor, and we love to tease. And so for me, a lot of it really has been met with just, oh, what are you doing? And I think all methods of representation, yeah, are valid. And as just by existing, I know that I am Chipewyan. I know where I'm from. And in the case of people not understanding or willing to validate, quote unquote, my work, and again, also, frankly, it's none of my business. And I'm really only interested in, or not only interested, but I want to tell my story and I want to share my story in the most authentic way possible. And if I do that in a way that maybe upsets some people, then I guess it upsets some people.
I appreciate you answering that, because as you said, it's just between you and your community, and even if it is that way, a lot of your work is for personal joy. It's for processing memories, healing. So I think all of that's so valid on its own. And speaking of community, I did want to ask a little bit about where we are now. We're sitting in Ma's house in the gallery. This is a grassroots project that's up and coming. And it is a little bit, maybe not in the case of your community, which is very remote. You said it was 5 or 6 hours away from the closest gallery. But I wonder if with your unique skills of running a gallery, being an artist and having that experience, thinking about accessible materials, did you ever think of creating your own space and focusing on the work of your tribal community or the youth or anything in that realm?
Yeah. And actually just my artwork is, as a Chipewyan person, and I'm sure you feel the same way too, we're not monoliths. And especially as artists too, I do not represent every single Chipewyan person, as I'm sure you don't represent every Shinnecock person. And next question. It is something that I think about quite often. A very large reason for me, I've been in Vancouver for the past 11 years, and unfortunately, it's where you gotta go to really start something. But I've definitely thought about what I can do for my communities, even if I'm not there. And so that actually brings up a really exciting thing that I'm lucky enough to share. It's still being figured out, but as an independent curator as well, not only for the gallery, but I'm currently working on developing a project featuring strictly Northwest Territories artists, which is going to be a group show of artists in Toronto. That's as much as I can share about it right now. It's still a work in progress, but something that I've really been thinking about over the past couple of years is representation, specifically of Dene and Chipewyan artists and artists from my nation, because if you look at the Canadian art space, it's few and far between that you find artists from the Northwest Territories. They are there, and there are some of them scattered throughout Canada. In terms of the Northwest Territories, it's not really represented in any of these spaces. So that's something that I am very conscious of and that I'm thinking about and hopefully working towards changing. I know so many beautiful artists up there who don't necessarily work in photography, who are amazing beaters, who are amazing quill work artists, caribou hair tufting. There's so many spaces that they should be in, and if I can help facilitate them getting into those spaces, that's something that I would love to do.
Thank you for that. It's really exciting. I'll look out for that exhibit once it's announced. But speaking of exciting news, you also mentioned that your series or your photograph, My Guardian Angel, is tired. is going to debut as the main focus of an upcoming show. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, which is really exciting. It's going to be my first institutional show. What I can share is that it is a very big institution on the east coast of Canada. And yeah, it's a solo presentation of my work, which primarily is going to feature My Guardian Angel is Tired, which is incredibly exciting. And this came to be because I had last year in 2024, I co-curated the Contemporary Native Art Biennial in Montreal. I co-curated it with Laurie Beavis, Emma Passenshall-Hurley, and Teresa Vandermeer-Chaussee. And together we brought over 80 Indigenous artists and curated 8 separate shows over 5 months, which was a lot of work, but it was so amazing. From that experience, I made really beautiful connections. Now we'll be having my very first institutional show, which is going to feature My Guardian Angel is Tired. And I guess I can briefly chat about that one as well. Yeah, I'll give you like the quick version. So My Guardian Angel is Tired is a work that I developed at the Banff Arts Center of Arts and Creativity in Alberta in 2023. And so it is a series of 5 fractured images that are separate, but that form a figure laying down covered in 5 separate substances. Yeah, and so the piece is 15 feet by 60 inches, I believe. And yeah, you can see there that all 5 images come off the wall and are at different lengths. Looking at them straight on, they make up this figure. And this body of work came about because of a joke that I used to make in my early 20s. I used to go out and used to party a lot, and I'd roll into work or school on Monday, and someone would ask me how my weekend was, and I'd joke and say, My Guardian Angel is tired, after looking after all the crazy shit that I got into over the weekend. And yeah, I wanted to visualize what my guardian angel looked like, and especially all the crazy things that I was doing. And I was really thinking about that phrase, my guardian angel is tired. And yeah, it started out as a joke, but I really spent time with it. And like a lot of my work, half of it is a joke, because I do believe that humor can coexist with these serious subjects. But I was examining that phrase, my guardian angel is tired. I was like, God, what am I really putting my guardian angel through? And so I'm covered with 5 different materials. So on the feet, I'm covered in sugar, which is meant to be representative of addiction to drugs, addictions to people, addictions to sweetness. My private area is covered by dirt, which is meant to be representative of how I felt dirty a lot, dirty about my sexuality, and also trying to bury myself and trying to bury sexual trauma. And then the center image, I'm covered in snow, which is like my central nervous system. And it's not the truth, because you just look like an asshole. And so it really is important to lead with love until someone crosses you, and then be as cold as you want. And then the next image is my head covered in honey, and also meant to be representative of drowning in sweetness, drowning in alcohol, but also thinking about honey as a preservative and trying to just preserve myself. And then the last image is my hand reaching out, and it's a little hard to tell, but there are bubbles. And that's been meant to be representative of this kind of desire that I've always had, even since I was a kid, of things that are light, things are ephemeral, things are bubbly. Yeah, and putting them all together and really having it at 15 feet, and it's large. If I can get something that's within me into a photograph and just like really examine it and be like, whoa, it's almost like I need to turn on my own light bulbs. And so yeah, with this piece, it very much turned on a few light bulbs for me, and I was like, oh, I think I got to start being a little kinder to my guardian angel, because yeah. But yeah, it was like incredibly important work to make, and I'm so thrilled to be showing it in this very new, exciting opportunity, which is going to be opening next year also.
That's awesome. So grateful for you describing that project. I'll share it once it's public. Mm-hmm. Hopefully didn't break any NDAs.
No, I think we're good. No, I don't think I said the name of the institution. So I think we're good.
We haven't touched on so many of your individual images, your different projects, but now that you're a Moz House alum, we'll have to check in after your show's debut, once you have time between your 4 jobs, maybe 5 coming up. Also wanted to shout out Jenny Gao, who you both met at the Armory, and that's the reason you're here, word of mouth.
Yeah, which also just kind of speaks to the power of relationships and word of mouth. Because, yeah, I was working the Armory last year, and I had never met Jenny before, and Jenny had come in and she's, oh, you're from Vancouver? I'm from Vancouver. And it's like, oh, what are you doing here? I'm doing a residency here. And then got to know each other. And then, yeah, she described the residency and she was like, yeah, definitely apply. And so I did. And so now I'm
here. So incredible. And I think when I saw your portfolio, your images, I was like, what is this person doing applying to our small little space?
No, I think briefly just to talk about the experience that I've had here, it's been amazing. And I think what you do and your family and what Brianna do in this space is not a small thing. It really is so important, and especially to have it be specifically for BIPOC people, because it's just always really important to highlight and uplift our communities, especially those that are marginalized. And yeah, I think just having a space, and especially be here in Moz House and on the Shinnecock Reservation, is just, and to have everyone be so welcoming, and just, it's been really transformative, and I'm so grateful for it because I've had such a great time, and I've been able to rest, I've been able to recharge, I've been able to write about my work, which is something that I don't do enough because if you look at my website, it's just the images, and like for months I've been like, oh, I have to have some, even if it's just a sentence, but just, yeah, so I've gotten a lot of that writing done. And it is also so nice to do the artist talk that I did today at Longhouse, and even this, it's so wonderful for me as well, because I get sometimes like I discover new things about the work. I'm like, oh, that is actually what it is about, and I write it down. But yeah, I've had the opportunity to rest, recharge, make new works, think about what new directions I want my work to go. But yeah, it just where I want my work to go. And yeah, I'm just really grateful.
Grateful you're here too. And you were here at the same time as the Joshua Allens. We'll have to do their interview, talk about their time here. We just have to keep in touch, hopefully get more of your work in person in New York State on the East End. We'll have some house shows as well. You'll have to get in touch with your gallery.
I think another great thing about residencies in general is just the connections of who you meet, because the world could fit on the tip of a needle, and it is quite small for how big it is. Jenny being a prime example of just how that connection led to this connection, which who knows where that's going to lead to. So I think, and especially to really have these new relationships between Vancouver and New York, like Canada and the US. I think it's exciting.
Thank you so much again, Jake, for being on the Moz House podcast. So many more questions, but next time we'll dive in another direction.
I have to come back.
Yeah. Thank you all for listening. Do you have any final words?
Masi Cho to you, the entire team at Moz House, to Brianna, the Shinnecock people, and for having me. So just Masi Cho.